Hello, my name is Jonathan Moeller. Today is July 22nd, 2022, and today I'm going to read an excerpt from my new novel, CLOAK of SPEARS, the seventh book in my Cloak Mage series of urban fantasy novels. Back in the old days, authors used to do book tours and read an excerpt at each stop. That wasn't very economical to do back then in terms of actually selling books, and it's even less economical to do so nowadays since the internet has come along. But the internet also makes it easier to do this kind of thing, so here is an excerpt from CLOAK of SPEARS as read by the author. I ended the call and looked back at Reardon. Are elven knights even allowed to challenge me to a duel? I don't know, said Reardon. Elven nobles fight duels fairly often. It's one of their preferred methods of resolving disputes. But I've never heard of anyone challenging a marshal to a duel. I think it's forbidden during wartime. Except we're not technically at wartime, and I'm not an elven noble, I said, lifting my phone and punching a number. Lady Turinda, come here, please. We have a problem. Turinda now had an office in the main warehouse. She also had 2 personal assistants and an office manager. That seemed excessive, but it turns out that Turinda actually was a lawyer. She had the equivalent of a JD from an elven school I hadn't known about, and it had been easy for her to get a license to practice in Wisconsin. So now she both served as my master of ceremonies and the in-house legal counsel for the army of the Great Gate. She glided through the door 45 seconds later, clad in a blue gown and mantle. One of her assistants, a somewhat beleaguered young woman named Monica, followed her, a tablet in hand. Marshal, Captain General, said Turinda, how can I serve? There's an elven knight at the front gate challenging me to a duel, I said. Can he do that? Turinda blinked several times. Oh dear, she said, that could be a problem. So he can challenge me to a duel, I said. Well, yes and no, legally speaking, but mostly yes, said Turinda. Some of my annoyance with the situation must have shown on my face because she got to the point. There is a formal code of dueling to govern such matters. It's supposed to apply only to elven nobles. Commoners can't challenge each other to duels, and neither can humans. It would be beneath the dignity of a noble to present a challenge to a human, except you're the Marshal of the Great Gate, so I'm a special case, I said. Yay, lucky me. There could be any number of reasons an elven noble is challenging you to a duel, said Turinda. You offered personal offense with your tendency towards blunt speech, an accusation of cowardice or gross negligence of duty, or one of Duke Vashtir's friends has decided to challenge you as a favor to him. Vashtir, I said, he wouldn't challenge me to a duel, would he? After that letter last year, likely not, said Turinda, but it's entirely possible that one of his vassals or knights is challenging you at the Duke's suggestion. Unofficially, of course. Great, I said. So do I have to accept this challenge, or can I tell him to screw himself? It depends, said Turinda. If the challenge is over spurious or frivolous grounds, yes. However, declining would make you look weak, especially since you have never fought a duel before. I think, said Reardon, a good place to start is to see who this elven lord is and his grounds for challenging you. That makes sense, I said. I looked back at Turinda. Unless I can make the noble wait outside until he gets hypothermia. It's supposed to be below 0 again tonight. That is a possibility, said Turinda. I had been making a joke, but she took the question seriously. You could cite the many responsibilities of your office and say you do not have time for trivial matters. However, that would open you to accusations of cowardice from the other elven nobles. She paused. Also, depending on the particular grievance your challenger brings, it might be serious enough that you have to address it. What would constitute a serious enough accusation, said Reardon. Cowardice in the face of the enemy, said Turinda. Treason. Or if you killed one of the challenger's relatives. Basically anything that would constitute a major felony in the American legal system. She frowned. Have you ever killed an elven noble, Marshal? I've been responsible for the deaths of a lot of people, I told her, which was true. The only elven noble I had ever personally killed had been Baron Castamere of Lacrosse, who I had shot in the head with a bullet made from Shadowlands metal. But as far as I knew, that wasn't general knowledge. The official record said that Castamere had died in a gas explosion. I don't think anyone missed Castamere enough to kill me for it. I had helped Morvelin kill a lot of Archons, but considering what the Archons had been like, I doubted anyone wanted to avenge them. All right, let's go see what this challenger wants. We left the office building and got into a golf cart. Okay, it wasn't actually a golf cart. It was a ruggedized electric cart with a roof and big all-weather tires. Fort Casey was large enough that walking from one end to the other took too long, so we got in a bunch of these vehicles. For that matter, the cart was tough enough to handle off-roading, at least in the relatively flat terrain of southeastern Wisconsin. But it looked like a golf cart, so we all called them that. Reardon took the driver's spot, I sat in the front passenger seat, and Turinda huddled in the back. We drove through Fort Casey, and I looked over the buildings as we passed them, listening as Turinda gave me a crash course on the rules and traditions of dueling among the elven nobles. Row after row of Quonset-style metal buildings had been put up in a hurry, their sides glinting in the dim light over the overcast day. There was a lot of construction underway as more permanent buildings went up. In the distance, as always, I could just hear the faint rumble of trucks on the road to the Great Gate as they waited for their customs inspections and paperwork, and I was responsible for all of it. God, how had that happened? 5 months in, and it still baffled me. Irritation followed bafflement. I had a lot of urgent things to do, and I had to take some time to see why some random elven noble had challenged me to a duel. Maybe this was how Tarlia felt most of the time. Turned a corner, and the main entrance to Fort Casey came into sight. A security fence topped with barbed wire surrounded the grounds of the fort, with cameras and motion detectors mounted on poles. The gate had a blast-fortified security booth with spots for cars to pull over so they could be inspected for bombs and contraband. Right now, 20 men stood before the gate on the interior side, weapons in hand. On the exterior side waited a group of a half-dozen horsemen, all of them clad in the gleaming battle armor of elven nobles. Ceremonial armor, not actual field armor. The difference was that ceremonial armor was bright and shiny and drew the eye, which was a liability in an actual combat situation. Riordan parked the car, and we got out. "Marshal," said Bird, who stood with the MPs watching the elven nobles. "Captain General, Lady Turinda." "They make any trouble?" I murmured. "Other than blocking the flow of traffic?" said Bird. His cheeks had gotten red from the cold. "No. I asked them politely to move to the side, and they did. But they said they would deliver their challenge only to you, personally." I looked over the 6 nobles on their horses. They all had swords, but as far as I could see, they had no other weapons. Of course, elven nobles could all use magic with varying degrees of skill. I had to admit that they made an impressive sight, sitting on their horses in their shining armor. Granted, about 50 yards down the road, I saw a pair of pickup trucks at the shoulder. Each truck had pulled a horse trailer. The nobles had driven here, parked, mounted up, and then ridden to the gate, which made the whole thing much less impressive. Guess you're supposed to deliver a formal challenge from horseback, not the passenger seat of a pickup truck. "I should announce you," said Turinda. I bit back a sigh of irritation. "Fine." Turinda glided forward, her gown and cloak bright against the snow in the gray winter sky. All eyes turned towards her, which no doubt pleased her. She walked past the guard booth and stopped before the elven horseman. "And you are, my lady?" said the horseman in the center. I couldn't see his face beneath the winged helmet, but his voice sounded a bit reedy. "I am Turinda Valand, herald of the Marshal of the Great Gate," she declaimed in a loud voice. "I announce Nadia McCormick, Marshal of the Great Gate, the World Burner, the Champion of Morvaland." Ugh, so many titles. I reached into my coat and drew out my marshal's badge so it would hang from its lanyard and rest against my chest, and then I walked out to join Turinda. All eyes shifted from her to me. "You are the marshal?" said the horseman in the center. "That's right," I said. "Who are you?" He reached up and drew off his golden helmet. The elves are usually beautiful. It's a strange and alien beauty. The proportions of their faces are all wrong to be human. That said, the elven horseman looked a bit nebbish, let's say, for lack of a better word. He kind of reminded me of the husband of Lady Tirana, Duke Vashtir's current mistress. Apparently, he knew that his lord was sleeping with his wife, and had decided not to raise the topic. The elven noble atop the horse had something of the same cringing air, though he had bright purple eyes and thick silver hair. Oh, and he was terrified of me. Last year I learned the Veil spell, which blocked intrusions of mind magic. Since then, I had realized that the elven noble strong enough to cast the spell more or less kept it constantly activated. People who aren't familiar with magic sometimes think that wizards can read people's minds with ease, but it's a lot more difficult and complicated than that, with the possibility of things going badly wrong. I had started keeping a Veil spell up all the time myself. No sense in offering an avenue to attack. The elven noble sitting on the horse hadn't cast a Veil spell, which meant my aura sight worked on him. He was terrified. Absolutely terrified. Despite that, he met my gaze. The noble seemed calm, but because I could see his emotional aura, I saw the faint hints of fear leaking through his control. The pulsing vein in his throat, the tension in his jaw, the beads of sweat on his forehead even though it was freezing outside. "I am Telomar, Baron of Port St. Lucie," he announced in a grand voice. "Okay," I said. I didn't recognize his name, but I did know the name of the city, and it set my brain to working. Port St. Lucie was a bit north of Miami along the eastern coast of Florida. The city's baron was a vassal of Duke Kurantar of Miami, who I had robbed back in September during Hurricane H317. I thought I had gotten away clean. As far as I knew, Kurantar had no idea that he had been robbed. Was that what this was about? Telomar drew off his right gauntlet, extended his arm, and opened his hand. The gauntlet fell between us with a clang. "Marshal of the Great Gate," he said, "I challenge you to a duel." "On what basis?" I find that you are unworthy to hold your office and suited to your rank, said Telemar, and I will prove it through force of arms. Based on what Turinda had told me, I was well within my rights to tell him to go to hell. The trouble was, it would make me look weak. Duke Kurantar didn't like the High Queen all that much, but he hated Duke Vashtir. Apparently, Vashtir had tried to seduce Kurantar's wife and daughter in the same day, and it hadn't gone well. Because of that, Kurantar had stayed mostly neutral between the blocks of nobles who supported Tarlia and Vashtir. Did Telemar have friends in Vashtir's party, or had Kurantar sent him to this duel? Fine, I said. I accept your challenge, Baron of Port St. Lucie. I remember what Turinda had said during the ride over here. We shall fight with sword and spell to either death or yielding. So that is an excerpt from Cloak of Spears. You can get the book at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Google Play, Apple Books, and Smashwords. Links to the various stores are below in the video description. Additionally, if you want to start Nadia's adventures, you can get her very first book, Cloak Games Thief Trap, for free on all the different ebook stores. So thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the excerpt, and have a good rest of the day.